The idea of Pokemon existing in our world has been a thought in my head for as long as Pokemon's been around, and I'm not alone in thinking this. It's not hard to imagine you'd spend your days making friends and training fantastical creatures on top of never having to go to school or work. I was so jealous of people in the Pokemon world because their versions of animals were leagues above ours. But it didn't take long before I recalled, wait a minute, animals do exist in the Pokemon world, so I wonder what humans think of those creatures. So in this video, we're here to explore the concept of animals in Pokemon, how the two species relate to one another, and how one replaced the other over time. It might be hard to believe that animals have any sort of history with Pokemon, but they've been around just as long as Pokemon, and sometimes even predate them depending on the source. If you remember the videos I did on the Pokemon anime's original writer, Takeshi Shudo, you'll know he painted the Pokemon world in a very different way to most others. I mentioned that he had written up a couple novelizations for the anime, and in the first book he not only expanded on character backstories, but also on the very creation of Pokemon. The prologue states that the world was created in 7 days, like in many biblical stories, but on the 7th day some extra animals were created, those being Pokemon. It goes on to say some Pokemon resemble creatures we know, but at the same time are unlike anything we've seen before. Shudo compares it to how humans have similarities to other primates, but really are their own thing, and trying to figure out the meaning behind their existence is as complicated as the mystery surrounding our own species. Delving into other sources, it seemed like the Pokemon concept was a lot more recent and took the in-universe world by storm, much like how it would our own world. In May 1997, Game Freak released a book exclusively in Japan called The Official Pokemon Fanbook, and it had little segments called Pokemon columns, expanding on the Pokemon phenomenon. One column covers the recent discovery that Pokemon, like animals, have a food chain, but it isn't clear on what eats what for every species just yet. You can also see a little dragonfly on this Slowpoke's head here. Another column goes into the discovery of Dratini, originally thought of as just a myth until a fisherman landed one in the Safari Zone. It was one of many reports of strange creatures popping up in parts of the world, and people wonder if some of these could be Pokemon, which is interesting. When reports of newly discovered creatures make the news in our world, most of us don't think, could that be some kind of non-animal? They're mysterious, but we know they're animals, and depending on what kind it is, we can already make educated guesses on how it lives, what it eats, etc. To be in a world where you don't know whether the creature you discovered is normal or alien is pretty darn mystifying. I remember I used to own a Weepinbell card, the one where a little bird is just perched on the Weepinbell, and I would stare at it for what felt like hours. There seems to be several card-related art that feature animals with Pokemon, and it was something I always found really cool. When you think of mentions of animals in Pokemon, the first thing your mind probably goes to is the Pokédex, as they're usually referenced in a Pokemon's classification. For example, Pikachu is the mouse Pokemon, and that would mean mice would have to exist if they made that comparison. It'd be like if I saw a creature and called it dog-like, but dogs as we know them didn't exist in the first place. Some say classifications are made more for the player to give them an idea on what certain Pokemon were based on, but they also show up in the card game and the show, so it can be seriously debated. Animals also get the occasional mention in Pokédex entries, and for me, when I think animals in Pokemon, I think elephants. Indian elephants to be precise. Things like bugs and fish I can get behind, but elephants just straight up exist? And why Indian elephants? It's so oddly specific, especially with how they relate to certain Pokemon. Ghastly's poison gas can down one of them in mere seconds, and Raichu's got enough electric juice to knock one out. They even mentioned elephants again in Raichu's Gen 7 entry, so they're still thinking about it. And even when an animal has a perfectly acceptable Pokemon equivalent, said animal may still get referenced separately from the Pokemon. Tentacool, for instance, is the jellyfish Pokemon, but in Gen 1, a sailor on the SS Anne tells you that jellyfish sometimes drift onto the ship, and every time I read that I go, wait, what do you mean by that? You mean Tentacool, right? Or like, real jellyfish? A similar thing happened in the anime episode Tentacool and Tentacruel. When Nastina is describing how much she hates Tentacool and Team Rocket talks about how they'll get rid of them for her, their fantasies show real-life jellyfish to visualize Tentacool, and I thought, why aren't they just showing Tentacool? And half the time someone referred to Tentacool, they flip-flop by either referring to it by name or just straight up calling them jellyfish. Oh, and Nastina's aquarium also has real fish, but I'll get back to that soon enough. One really cool animal reference can be found in the old Amber item, the fossil used to bring back Aerodactyl. The item's artwork from Red and Green shows a mosquito trapped inside the resin, in reference to real-world Amber usually containing insects inside of it. People theorize that extracting the DNA from the insect insects' preserved blood would result in resurrecting creatures from the past, like in Jurassic Park for instance. And while that hasn't worked in our world, it worked out pretty well for Pokemon, from a species that isn't even a Pokemon, mind you. The anime had moments of animals showing up too, and you'll usually find examples in the earlier seasons. There's been real fish in aquariums and oceans, people eating burgers, sirloin steaks and chicken, the all-famous Caterpie joke, the usual stuff most people bring up. For food, I just chalk that up to regular people food, and Takeshi Shudo has said things like fish were mistakes from staff who weren't aware of what they were working on, which begs the question, how do you even do that with a show like Pokemon? But with that said, there's clear evidence the idea of animals was at least thought about for a while, like with this piece of concept art that just features a regular old cat in this lineup of people. Then there's that one image from an old picture book based on the show, which shows Ash, Misty, and Brock at some festival, and walking right past them is a dog. Not a Growlithe, but an honest-to-goodness dog, and I've always looked at this with awe and confusion. What was the reasoning behind this? Did that guy not know he was making something for Pokemon either? Going off that, in a recent rediscovery, illustrations from a Korokoro magazine from '97 teased the day and night mechanic for the upcoming Gold and Silver. Both drawings featured real animals alongside Pokemon, with daytime showing some type of bird and a Hercules beetle, and nighttime showing a Haunter right beside an owl. This isn't a Noctowl, this is an owl, and nobody's making a fuss about it. It's just so intriguing. This was all at a time when Pokemon was still building itself up as a franchise, and I guess they went with what they thought felt right before the Pokemon world became a Pokemon world. Take the first 3 episodes of the show for instance, where animal terminology is tossed around without a care, like it's just Earth with Pokemon in it. When Ash first meets Pikachu, Professor Oak said it was also known as an electric mouse instead of calling it a mouse Pokemon. And later on, we see a Pidgey just eating a worm. The next episode, we find out Misty is afraid of bugs and freaks out seeing a Caterpie. She says that whether it's a bug or a bug Pokemon, she is not a fan of them. Episode 3, Ash's Pidgeotto makes its debut eating a worm, much like Pidgey before it. Misty also refers to Pidgeotto and Caterpie by the animals they resemble, and on a side note, Caterpie goes through its evolutions much like a real caterpillar. And skipping ahead a bit, I know everybody who's watched the Maiden's Peak episode remembers when they saw a mongoose, the most blatant example of an animal in Pokemon, and as Ghastly said, the snake's natural enemy. Later, when they introduced Zangoose in Gen 3, I used to go, oh yeah, that mongoose from that one episode, that'd be a Zangoose nowadays. Also, in the original Japanese, the mongoose says its own name like your average Pokemon. Just thought that would be cool to bring up. Mongoose. I'm sure some of you also know that the animal concept was planned to be addressed more directly in the original draft of the 3rd movie. This is something I've covered before, so I'll try not to repeat myself. In a deviation from his novels, Takeshi Shudo said there weren't any animals in the Pokemon world, or at least not anymore. There's plenty of evidence that proves they were around, from documents to pictures, but everyone alive today weirdly has no recollection of ever seeing one. Evolution as we know it doesn't exist either, and scientists who try to figure all this out put their regular work on hold and move out to the countryside, with Professor Oak being one of those people. He finds a T-Rex fossil, it comes to life, and everything goes back to normal by the end. An interesting idea, but due to several reasons it was scrapped. But some form of that draft was bought by some Japanese fellow named Sue for a lot of money, and I hope he knew what he had on his hands because I'd love to see that script for myself one day. Animals also showed up in the early days of the Pokemon manga, with people being very much aware of their existence in some cases. They show up in the Pocket Monsters gag manga, but that series has a very anything goes attitude with pretty much everything, so I'll cover some of the more conventional stuff. Like Shudo's novelizations, the Electric Tale of Pikachu manga describes Pokemon as, quote, a species not recorded in traditional taxonomies, classified as a single species as they share a similar cellular structure. They're not animals, they're their own thing. They also flat out say that Pokemon evolution is different to regular evolution. Where it would take generations for animals to change forms, Pokemon do it in no time at all, akin to metamorphosis. And as for examples of animals, the Cerulean Gym has fish in its aquarium like in the anime, but as this manga tends to do, it kicks things up a notch and the gym's also got jellyfish, dolphins, and whales! Actual whales with weird horn-looking things like a narwhal or something! And a couple years back, I was reading the 2nd volume of the Pokemon Adventures manga when I got to the chapter A Hollow Victory Bell. A family of Victory Bells Weepinbell, Weepinbell, and Bellsprout were sucking the nutrients out of various living things, none of them Pokemon. The Pokédex goes on about how the Bellsprout line is carnivorous, with Victory Bell's stadium entry even saying it eats large animals, and here we see they've wrapped things up like a shrew, a frog, and some real-life birds. Sometimes I wonder if animals exist in this world solely to be eaten. As the Pokemon franchise has grown, it hasn't really had the need to refer to real-world animals, and nowadays references are rarer than ever. We still get things like small insects, coral, barnacles, and gastrodons said to eat microscopic plankton, but the average person won't view those as animals like they would a dog or a cat. And during my research, I stumbled upon something called the Pokemon Product Approval Manual, presumably released around the time of Black and White. It was given out to companies who made Pokemon merchandise and went over the basic do's and don'ts for the franchise. Apart from saying that the Pokemon world should never be referred to as Earth, Pokemon are the only creatures to exist, and they make it clear there are no animals. And yeah, if I was in charge, I wouldn't want who was making my plushies to make me something that wasn't a Pokemon, but I'd still like to imagine animals are a part of that world somehow. I think the inclusion of animals in a world already full of weird creatures sets the groundwork for great stories and lore, and I wish it would have been explored a bit more. But just because they're gone doesn't make the Pokemon themselves any less special. Even with how much we've learned about them, they're still seen as things we don't know everything about. Kind of like how things are here on Earth with animals. I like how that's still one element that hasn't gone away, and I'm perfectly fine with more animals getting Poke-equivalents with each generation. And I mean, never say never, who knows if they ever bring this animal concept back? It's weird and a bit out of place, but it boggles my mind and I am all for it. Hey guys, thanks for watching. I really hope you enjoyed what you saw. If you did, feel free to give this video a like, share it with a friend, subscribe, check out all my social media pages, all that good stuff that I always ramble on about. And make sure to check out my Patreon page for weekly blogs, behind the scenes looks on videos like this, and other fun surprises. And what do you guys think? Do animals have a place in the Pokemon world? Tell me your thoughts in the comments below. And with all that said, I'll see you guys next time for another installment in this month of Pokemon. Catch you later.